you have instincts that will be ingrained in you no matter what you do for how you are going to turn knobs to make a mix sound done or right to you. You will have your instincts at play no matter what you do. I venture to say that it's nonsense to try to learn your monitors. It's nonsense. Because you wind up fighting against your instincts, and trying to learn that would be go against what you like. Try to like what you don't like. How about that? Like what you don't like. Does that sound a little ridiculous? So because of that, I ignore that part. I mean, learn your monitors doesn't have to happen to the 10th power if you get monitors that line up with the way you hear naturally. Now, the only way to do this is by trying multiple sets of monitors. But what you'll find when you do that, and I'm about to go through a similar thing like this, by trying at least 2 different sets of monitors, is I'm going to see if it lines up with my taste, meaning this. If we take out the fact that the room is, not treated well enough, because my room is. The new room I'm building, my new control room, has a lot of absorption. The percentage of coverage is very high, okay? So I know the reflections are not going to be a problem. So judging from that point forward, where I'm at is if I listen to the speaker and it sounds like a very bright speaker, like the top end is, shrill, spitty, any of these words you want to use to describe a bright speaker, I know based on my taste and my ears that I don't usually let those frequencies live in mixes when they hurt my ears. Me going, or like being like, that's super bright, that's a telltale sign for me to turn down the high end. So what will happen if I use a speaker that's too bright? I will, no matter what, turn down the high end. And then when I get into the car or any other listening environment, the mix is going to sound dark. So that would not be a speaker that complements the way I hear. A more like softer and balanced top end would potentially allow me to not touch the top end in the mix if it doesn't need it. I'll be like, this is okay. It won't hurt my ears. So I won't turn down the top. And then when I get into a place like the car, if the mix translates in the top end and nothing sounds too bright, that's a good compliment for how I hear. Do you understand? But if I get into the car and it sounds too bright, now I know it's way too bright because the speakers are giving me too dark of a top end in my room. It's too dark. So what I'm basically giving you is, this is what you do when you buy new monitors. You buy multiple sets. You try them on multiple mixes, not the same mix 82 times. You then see if it translates. And the speakers you work on that wind up translating, you've just solved the riddle to which speakers complement my ears. That's what you've done. There's plenty of people out there. I saw this great comment. I don't remember what the video was, but somebody said that they were mixing on every speaker they used and making them, every speaker, they tried to make them sound like Genelecs. It wasn't on purpose that they tried to do it. They were trying to make every speaker sound like Genelecs. And then when they used Genelecs, they realized they had to do a whole lot less. And when they went to the car, other listening environments, those were the mixes that translated the best. Whereas on every other speaker, when they tried to make them sound the way a Genelec speaker would, it sounded terrible everywhere. Because those speakers were not complementing the way they hear. Whereas when they heard through the Genelecs, they realized this is closer to complementing my ears. And I know this because it translates. That's the only way you know it, is if it translates. Because the speaker will solve a lot of the problems in the mix if it complements your ears, and it will ruin your decision making if it doesn't complement your ears. And anybody who thinks this isn't true, we all hear completely differently. So how could you possibly think that everyone can use the same speaker, or everyone is going to automatically hear the same thing and do the same thing. We won't. We all have personal taste. And I think the way to mix and make it enjoyable is to be able to make decisions in the mix that line up with your taste. It has to line up with your taste and then work. That's the other part of it. It can't just line up with your taste and now everything sounds good to you, but it doesn't work. That means what you're being fed from the speaker is not what you should be being fed for your ears. You understand what I'm saying? This is why it's not about flat. If we all heard flat, and that's what every one of us hears, then yes, flat would be flat in our ears and in the speaker, and that would be good. Since we don't, since some of us hear with certain nulls in our just the way we hear, certain of us have, issues with our hearing. Certain of us have different things going on where we don't hear as much bass, or we hear less of these, 5K or different, everything different because of that. And because our preferences are all different for what we like, no two people are going to feel the same way about a speaker. And no two people will make the same mix decision based on what they're hearing. This is why if you ever go into a mix engineer studio and you sit behind him in the room, even like right really close to him so you can see where his, like nobody does this, but if you were right in his ear, like over his shoulder, chilling, you would not make the same mix decisions that they would make because their ears are not yours. They hear different than you, but they also, their preference and their taste may line up with their speakers, which is why they don't have to go to the car 10 times when they're done with the mix. They make their decisions. It's to their taste in the room, and then it works. Whereas you may be like, man, can you crank this a little or crank that a little? But you have different ears, don't know what these speakers, maybe they don't line up with your ears. They don't complement the way you hear. So you're trying to make them do something that may not work in the outside world because the speakers don't complement your ears. Whereas the guy who's using the speakers probably took the time and pains to make sure he's using the speakers that work for him. And then he doesn't have to do any translation. He makes it work with his taste, and then that works in the world, right? And when you get this right, the amount of learning curve for learn your speakers will be drastically reduced. When you get this right, the amount of time it'll take you to learn your room will be drastically reduced. Because the other thing here that's critically important is where you put the speakers. In other words, how far from you, how far from the wall. It's all based on how long your room is, how wide your room is, how high your ceiling is. Because this stuff is all going to affect where the null points are and where the boosts of certain frequencies are, and whether you're sitting in a null point and then you back up a few feet and you're not. You back your desk up, you're not. Or whether you move your speakers a little bit and you're no longer creating a null where you're sitting, because it's all relative. So moving around within your room is key, but the first step to do, if you ask me, is a substantial amount of absorption coverage in your room. And in my personal opinion, what I have found, and I think people should hear this, because a lot of people hear, that you don't want to put too much absorption in your room because it will create an uncomfortable environment to mix in. It will be too dead. And that's sort of unnatural, and our ears will have to try to figure out the room, and that constantly trying to figure out will make us sick or weary or whatever. Do you know what makes me sick? Do you know what makes me want to vomit? Going in the car 15 times. That's what makes me sick. If I get the mix to translate well and I have to work on it less in order to do that by like not running to the car and keep checking it, it just translates, then I'm all of a sudden okay with a very dead room. Like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about you have to work on the song less because you get it right. And in my experience, more absorption gets to this point. In other words, can there be too many bass traps in your room, thick enough traps to absorb low end so that you're hearing the direct amount of low end? In my opinion, no. I don't believe there can, because I've never wanted to puke and been sick from being in a room that's too dead. I'm only sick when I have to run to the car 10 times and I'm not done with the song and I got to keep changing things and I can't hear this problem I hear in the car in the room. I can't hear it. Why not? Because there's not enough absorption. Because the null point cannot be taken out with EQ. Hear this loud and clear. If there's a boost in some frequency, you can tame that with EQ. If there's a null point in your listening position based on the positioning of the speakers, the room modes, all this stuff, where you're listening, if there's a null, you cannot take that out with EQ. The more you push into it, you're driving your speakers harder. You're always going to have a null point, no matter what. You can't fix it. So the idea that you could just EQ out your problems is not true for some problems. The nulls, okay? It's true for boosts. It's not true for the nulls. So when you keep all this stuff in mind, everything I'm explaining, the same concept too applies with, like, if you want to hear, you know, clean, accurate, detailed low end, don't separate it into subwoofers. If you ask me, my opinion is that's not helpful. I want the direct sound coming from the speaker, so a bigger speaker would be better. I want speakers that sound, how can I put this? I want them to sound accurate to my ears in the top end, more importantly probably than all the rest, because if it sounds okay, I won't touch it. If it sounds too bright, I have to make it darker because I cannot mix a song for hours and the whole time be in pain. And the top part is what hurts me. That's the part where my ears are the most sensitive. So for my ears, that top's got to be right where it sounds good here and it sounds good in the car. That's the most critical. Where in the low end, if I'm getting tight low end and I can hear the depth of what's going on in the low end, that there's a little more play on whether a speaker can have a little more low end or a little less low end. What I've realized is I don't need a ton of low end to be able to get a mix right. What I need is accurate low end, not flubby, woofy, nonsense low end coming from a subwoofer that's slightly out of phase with the rest. You know, that's not what I want. So keeping all this stuff in mind, is a lot here, and I don't want anyone to think this is easy. You know, everyone who's ever dealt with getting the right speakers has had to deal with this before. Always get speakers with a 30-day return policy, no matter what. Buying used, I recommend it highly because you can save a lot of money, but when you buy used on something like a speaker, you are just taking a risk, because most of those, when you're buying used, there's not 30-day return policies. If it's from like reverb.com or something like that, you know, you're buying from another seller who's trying to sell you their Genelex they used to use, and that only works if you've used those exact model speakers before and you're just replacing what you already know. If you don't know the speakers, you're out of your mind if you're just going to buy a pair of speakers and hope for the best. All right? I did that with these Barefoot 01s. I read reviews nonstop, forums nonstop, videos nonstop. I did a lot. And I bought the Barefoot 01s, and I've never really liked them. I've always been in a position where I'm like, it's just like, it doesn't work for me. They don't work for me. But I will try them in the new room I'm building alongside another set of monitors or two to know for sure what I'm hearing and have some contrast, because that will tell you more than everything else. You'll be able to listen, make a mix on it, a few mixes. That's why you need the 30 days, because you got to be able to do several mixes on multiple sets of speakers. And the key to the whole thing is, after you're done with the mix, does it translate? That's the important part. Once you find the speaker that you do the least amount with to have it translate, you know what there is to do. You hear no matter what happens, you're going to listen to your speaker. You're going to say, I know this needs this, 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 and this. That's what it is to be a mix engineer. We have taste. We implement our taste on what we're hearing. When you're done with that, without spending a week on it, do it in a reasonable pro fashion, straight line, right through it. You don't need to keep going back and checking your decision making and worrying, did you do it right? Don't do that. Listen with focused a clear headspace where you're paying attention, you're doing as best you can, you're taking breaks, you're coming, you finish the song in a reasonable amount of time, 1 to 2 days. You know what I'm saying? Then does it translate? Then do another song, 2 days. Does it translate? That's a 1 to 2 days. Does it translate? Do a few on each set of speakers. See where you're at that point, because I think it will be clear which speaker I should buy when I do this. And I'm planning on trying a couple different ones. So I could throw names at you, but I'm not exactly sure on which model of each as of yet. So if I was going to throw some names like ATCs, I plan on trying, okay? Either the 25s or the 45s. I plan on trying Genelex, 8351 or 8361. Those are the main ones that I want to try the most. And everyone's going to have a different set of speakers that just speaks to them. For some, because we can't help but read some stuff and listen. We've heard people talk, we've heard reviews, we've seen videos. It's all out there. So we can't really help but see that. And for whatever reason, like the Genelex for me, the fact that there's room correction built in, I like that a lot. Also, I like that they're probably going to give me something in the realm of what my NS10s do, because I was always very happy mixing on my NS10s. I just don't have enough information on them to get the things right I need to in today's day and age of music. So I need more low end. I need a little more, more from a speaker than the NS10s are giving me. But the ATCs and the Genelex are both kind of in that ballpark. And, the other speakers on my radar, the Dutch and Dutch 8C, but they're a fortune, so I probably won't try those because they're so expensive. And the other ones are a little closer in the ballpark of, the price of like the Genelex and the ATC ones I'm referring to. But also the Ex Machina Pulsars are an option. I mean, there's a lot of speakers out there that one could try if you're looking for a serious upgrade. And what I'm not telling you is you need these that I'm referring to for an upgrade. I'm saying, based on what you want, maybe you could get away with smaller speakers or something else. But try, whatever it is that speaks to you. And you got to try more than one. You can't do it with one. If you do it with one, you're going to be in the same boat where it'll sound good no matter what. And then you'll try to learn your speaker, and you won't even realize that the learning curve to learning your speaker could be so much higher than a speaker that naturally just complements the way you hear. That's the goal. The goal is not flat. That's why like plus or minus 1 dB throughout the whole, or half a dB throughout the whole spectrum, that's not interesting to me. That's not relevant. To me, that doesn't even make sense. Not for what would translate well in a mix. To me. All right? That's what I'm saying. So I'm curious what you guys think, because I know this isn't one-sided. And like I told you, first step, make sure your room doesn't have any drastic problems, because you won't be able to fix those with just an EQ. You need absorption. You need it. All right? Thicker the panels, the better. No foam. All right? Bottom line. Throw something in there. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say, because like I said, I'm about to buy these monitors like right snap, quick. So you're gonna see me testing them. Let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see about the test too, because I may just make them and then it's like, oh, I get a great idea from you guys in the comments that I didn't think of when I was making the video. But I'm gonna move them around in the room a bit. I'm gonna try 2 different kinds of monitors. Maybe I'll put a mic in the middle so you guys can kind of hear what's going on in the room from the mic's perspective. Like, I don't know, come up with ideas for me, please, because I need the help. I'll make the videos. I appreciate it. Hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. All right, we're on this journey together. I'll talk to you guys soon. Keep in mind, you guys got this. Evan Jaffe Custom Cut Studios, you got this. Take it easy.